Welcome to the mini lesson on skeletal muscle structure. So this lesson will focus on the anatomy of skeletal muscles. Remember that structure is a theme in the course, and another theme in the course, of course, is function. Even though this lesson will focus on structure, remember that all specific functions are performed by specific structures. So we will be talking about the structure of skeletal muscle, understanding that these structures are the basis for the process of force generation, which is contraction, and that is related to function of skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are structured hierarchically, and what that means is that the larger structures are composed of many smaller structures. So you can see the diagram on the right shows the hierarchy both in the drawing and in the schematic diagram with the boxes and the arrows. The largest of the structures shown in this diagram is the whole muscle, which would essentially be equivalent to an organ of the muscular system. Within a whole muscle, the next largest structure are things called fascicles. And the fascicles are essentially bundles of muscle fibers. Somewhere between 10 and 100 muscle fibers compose a fascicle. The word muscle fiber itself is the next largest structure, and muscle fiber is synonymous with muscle cell. Because muscle cells are shaped like long cylindrical fibers, they're often referred to as muscle fibers. Now, within each muscle cell, there are bundles of protein filaments called myofibrils. So that would be the next smallest structure. And you can see how the larger structures are composed by many smaller structures. The diagram that you see here is of a muscle fiber, or at least part of a muscle fiber, and you can see multiple myofibrils that are part of this muscle fiber. And one of the myofibrils has been pulled out of the muscle cells so that the structure of the myofibril is evident. What you're going to see in muscle fibers is hundreds to thousands of these myofibrils. And remember that myofibrils are, in essence, bundles of protein filaments. The two main protein filaments in a myofibril are actin, which is often referred to as a thin filament, and myosin, which is often referred to as the thick filament. And these protein filaments overlap each other in a very regular pattern, and that pattern is repeated to the left and to the right all along a myofibril. The repeating pattern is often referred to as a sarcomere. And the reason that the sarcomere is important is because if you think about the function of the skeletal muscle, which is contraction, that function is achieved within the sarcomere. And what I mean by that is that processes that are occurring in any given sarcomere are the same as the processes occurring in the other sarcomeres adjacent to the left and to the right. So a small amount of contraction in any one sarcomere is going to be added to the small amount of contraction in all of the other sarcomeres of that myofibril, and then of the muscle fiber, and then of the fascicle and the whole muscle, to generate a much stronger contraction. So you can see in this diagram there are two sarcomeres represented. You can see that the blue thin filaments, often referred to as actin, are tied together at this thing called a Z-line, which is so named because it sort of has a zigzag pattern. And that from Z-line to Z-line is the sarcomere. So the next slide is going to show that in more detail. The picture that you see on the right is actually of a micrograph, which is a picture taken through a microscope, And then below that is a drawing, essentially a representation of the micrograph that is maybe a little bit less accurate, but because it's a drawing, it can represent the structures a little bit clearer. So the thick and the thin filaments are going to overlap each other, and the pattern repeats along the entire muscle cell. And so, as I said in the previous slide, it is the small contractions occurring in each sarcomere that add up to the total muscle contraction. What you see in this slide is an even more diagrammatical representation of a sarcomere, and you can see that the red lines in this case are representative of that thin actin filament, and the darker blue or purplish lines are the thicker myosin, and you can see how they lay in a very regular pattern overlapping each other. And you can see that the actin filaments are attached to actin filaments on an adjacent sarcomere at the Z line. And so the sarcomere really runs from one Z line to the next. So this structure is the basis for the processes that will result in muscle contraction. And you can visit the other mini lesson on the cross-bridge cycle, and that mini lesson will talk a lot about the interaction between the actin and the myosin that results in contraction.